I have met with the next member of this group in question, Mr. Robert F. Kennedy, 5 times, speaking with and listening to him at some length each time. He has the near manic energy and loquaciousness of those with exceptional verbal intelligence and the intensely focused concentration that pushes people who have that proclivity beyond even their own limits in pursuit of a goal. He's dreadfully well informed, a veritable master of historical minutiae in a manner nonetheless relevant to today's concerns. He is also someone who, like Trump and Musk, can and does draw the overall picture accurately, and even in a somewhat prophetic manner. He is fearless and dedicated, having stood up and successfully against even the largest giants of the proto-fascist modern state, and has single-handedly drawn public attention to what is genuinely a health crisis of gargantuan proportions, despite its invisibility on the political stage until the current time. He's also someone once bitten, twice shy, a seriously wounded apostate, again, like Trump and Musk, as well as Tulsi Gabbard, from his own original favored party, the Democrats. When I first spoke with Mr. Kennedy on my YouTube channel, I asked him the same question I always ask the many Democrat leaders I have spoken with, most privately, unwilling as they generally are to risk being seen in public with the likes of me. The question, when do you think the left goes too far? His answer to that, in interview 1, at the very beginning of his presidential march?
I'm trying to run a campaign that brings people together rather than a campaign that tries, that is based upon, that kind of tribalism of condemning people for ideologies that I don't necessarily agree with.
I had my doubts about the suitability of that answer in the long run, having experienced precisely what happens when the left goes too far in my own private and personal life. Nonetheless, on that occasion, I let the question lie. I can tell you, however, that Mr. Kennedy had plenty to say on that topic when we spoke on YouTube on our second occasion. The erstwhile Democrat contender for president had, by that time, experienced running hard and headlong into precisely what I had intimated in the form of my initial and purposefully leading question. In consequence, Robert F. detailed for at least an hour his utter dismay with the power-mad, corrupt, ideologically possessed shenanigans of the progressive left, the very force that could continue its current domination of the public discourse and scene if Ms. Kamala Harris and the shadowy and unknown forces behind her ascent to power managed to maintain their positions come November. What is Kennedy like as a personality? Extroverted, like Trump, although perhaps not as much so. Trump is hard to equal, let alone top, in that regard. Not without his pain and negative emotion, like Musk. Not too agreeable, although not at all narcissistic. Despite his markedly forceful assertiveness in opinion and as a speaker, this was evidenced not least by my comparative silence, particularly during our second YouTube discussion. I'm a very talkative, verbally assertive person, for better or worse. But Mr. Kennedy had the stage for the vast majority of our time together. That was as it should be, in my opinion, given the circumstances, but it is still something that does not happen to me very often, even when I intend it to. Does this mean that RFK is inappropriately forward, self-aggrandizing, self-centered? Not in my experience. One anecdote quite tellingly reveals why. RFK Jr. and I encountered one another one evening in a restaurant I happened to be dining in during my last tour. I was there with Dr. Phil in a private room in the back of the building. Mr. Kennedy happened into the establishment, was informed that we were also there, and sent someone forward to ask if he could come and say hello. The fact that he so politely sought permission, since no offense would have been taken had he not, was something I noted, as was his somewhat near apologetic entrance asking the two of us very graciously to forgive the intrusion. An intrusion it was not, as we were happy to see him and pleased that he dropped in. He could have just taken that for granted, and even justly so. But he didn't. A trivial happening, you might object. But I think not. Instead of presuming, he displayed all the social niceties that might be hoped for, and more. I saw evidence of the same proclivity every time I met him. It's not all about RFK Jr., and that is a good thing to see, given the fame and family reputation that has been part and parcel of his life ever since day one. This is not to say that Kennedy, like Trump and Musk, is without his eccentricities. But as the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once so perspicaciously noted, great men are seldom credited with their stupidities. RFK Jr. is a singular person, with everything that entails on the positive and negative side. He has a somewhat conspiratorial mindset, which, given the means of demise of his uncle and father, is eminently understandable. Furthermore, there are indeed strange things afoot in the world today, such that Kennedy's suspicion on various fronts may be well warranted. Nonetheless, it's still a tendency that has to be carefully held in check. Better to assume incompetence than malevolence, for example, and adept pattern recognizers, of which Kennedy, like Trump, is certainly one, can be plagued by false positives, the tendency to see something that is in fact not there. But the tectonic plates are moving under our culture at an ever-increasing rate, and Kennedy's skepticism, his ability to see the forest and the trees, could easily prove something of great advantage to the American people, prone as they are now to manipulation by the looming quasi-fascist forces of the utopian, authoritarian, wannabe globalist state. Imagine for a moment that Musk can bring efficiency to the federal government, and that Kennedy, with his skepticism and willing to battle Goliaths, however large, stumbling, and blind, can seriously address the twin and terribly pervasive and serious problems of obesity and insulin resistance and their terrible spin-offs. These two things alone would be well worth much attendant risk, in my estimation. Who dares, after all, wins.